Hello again, everyone. In the last video, we outlined how to create an account as a teacher for Zoom so that you can use that for video conferencing with your students. And now in this video, we're going to outline how you can adjust some of your security settings so that they become the default settings, which are very important to ensure you have safe video conferencing with your students. So we can set those defaults by going back to the Zoom homepage, which is zoom.us, and we're going to click sign in. We've already previously created an account in the last step, and you remember we did that by signing in with Google using our G Suite for Education accounts through the WQSB. So we click on that icon, and I'm signed into my Chrome profile here with my same WQSB account. So it's going to take me right into my settings here, and I can adjust all of these settings here under settings. So in this section here, I now have the ability to customize a number of the different settings related to my defaults. So I'm going to go through some of the ones that I recommend outlining. So for myself, I really encourage people to start with video off. So I turn off host and participant video. That gives people time to get themselves set once they begin, either start hosting a meeting or participants. When they join, their video will be off by default, and then they have time then to decide when they would like to enable that. And again, it's a single click of the video camera icon to turn on their video. If you would prefer that your participants come in with their video on, if you think that would simplify things for younger users, then again, you can enable that feature there. Now, below that, we want to adjust again, make sure a couple things are set for safety. So join before host should always be off, that nobody else can join the meeting before you do. We are never going to use personal meeting IDs for our meetings. We're going to use randomly created IDs, and I'll outline that in a sec. So I do encourage actually that people disable this enable personal meeting ID, and that makes it so that, again, all of your meetings are going to be done through randomly assigned links for each session. So here's something that, again, is now locked because our accounts through the WQSB are with an educational institution. So you will have a password required for new meetings going forward. So that's good. We want to enable that. And again, you can double check that though whenever you do schedule your meetings that there is a password created. So that's fine. Now here's another setting that I really recommend disabling on your accounts by default. This will be on, but it's this feature here to embed password in invite link for one-click join. That means that Zoom is creating a password for these meetings, but it's actually just put into the meeting link that people click on, and so they can still, with a single click, access the meeting. I really encourage disabling this so that users will click the link that you send to them to join the meeting, but then they have to manually enter the password that will be included in the email that you send to them. And that's, again, an extra step for safety to ensure that only the people you want to access your meeting have access. So I encourage disabling that. Now, as we go down, again, things like with the video, I also encourage muting participants on entry. That makes sure that people aren't disrupted if others join late and your class is already in session. This way their microphones will be muted by default, and then they can enable them when they're ready. And those are the key security settings. There's two actually additional settings though I want to outline. So as you go down your page here, these are your initial ones under schedule meeting, but we're going to keep scrolling down the page, and I want to outline a couple others to ensure are set. You can enable whether chat is turned on or off for your groups by default. I do have chat enabled, but again, if in a setting where you're finding that's maybe not used in appropriate fashion, then you can disable chat for your meetings, and that can be turned off before a meeting and then re-enabled for another one. So it's something that you can enable on a per meeting basis. These are your defaults of what will be set for scheduled meetings going forward. So we're going to keep moving down here, and what we want to first find is the screen sharing. And so this is where you can control who has the ability to share their screen during a meeting. And again, in an educational setting, the majority of the time, that should really only be the teacher. There may be cases where you're asking students to share content that they've been working on over a certain amount of time, especially in this remote setting, which in that case, then during the meeting, you can enable their ability to share a screen. And I can outline a video of how to do that on a per meeting basis later. But in terms of your defaults, I highly encourage that. Screen sharing as a host is fine. That allows you to share content that you have on your screen with your attendees, but you should not enable all participants to have the ability to share their screen as a default. That should be disabled, and that's host only. So that's an important feature to outline there. And again, in the meeting, you can grant one user at a time access to start to share their screen if that's required for your session. So that's an important feature outline. The last thing I'm going to cover in terms of the kind of key settings is looking at what's called the waiting room. And you do have to scroll down a fair bit here, but as you do, you'll get to this feature here that says waiting room. And this should be enabled now by default on your Zoom accounts when you've set this up, but depending on when you did, it's possible that you do not have this enabled, or by accident, maybe someone has disabled it, but you absolutely want to ensure that the waiting room is enabled. And as the outlines here, that says that when participants join a meeting, it places them into a waiting room, all participants, and requires the host to admit them individually. Now, you can't actually admit your entire list in the waiting room at once, but in terms of best practices, it's really best to look at the names of your attendees as they join and click admit on an individual user basis. And that's ensuring that, again, only the people that you want to have access to your meetings are getting in. And it does require, again, some outlining of best practices with the people who are attending your meetings. When they get your meeting link, again, you've set it that you have a randomly generated meeting ID for each meeting. You've set it that you have passwords enabled. The password is not included in the meeting link, so they're going to have to type that in manually. And then once they are into the meeting, they will then be put in the waiting room. And it's going to ask them if most users join, if they have not created a Zoom account themselves, when they join your meeting, they're joining as a guest, and it's going to ask them what is their name that should display for the meeting. And so this is where it's really important to outline with your students and with parents that they need to use their full name, as it would appear on your class list, or as they're known in your class. So it's really important that they're not using any sort of nicknames. They're not using, even just a single name. I really encourage you to tell students and parents that nobody will be permitted into your meetings unless they're using a name that matches, again, what you would address them as in class, on your class list, or if they go by a different name. So that's really important, and that's a good best practice to follow, in that if anyone else joins your meeting and you see in your waiting room, if anyone else joins that goes by a name or has listed a name, a nickname, or guest, or an unknown name, or something other than what is a member of your class, you do not permit them to join the meeting. And that may mean that some people may try to join a session and they didn't take the time to actually input their name as it would appear in class, or as the teacher would know them as. But that's a really strongly recommended best practice, is that if somebody joins the meeting and they haven't taken the time to do that, you simply don't admit them in. And you can follow up with that student or parent later and outline the process, but I think that's a strong recommendation that you don't admit anybody that you do not know and that does not match exactly as they would appear on your class list. So those settings, again, the password, randomly generated meeting IDs, disabling screen sharing for other participants, and enabling the waiting room. Those are the key functions to set, and that's why we're doing it here right at the Zoom homepage in our settings. They will be the defaults now going forward for all meetings I schedule. So I don't have to do that on a one-by-one basis for my meetings. I still double check that before every meeting I schedule, but it's really important to go through and make those your defaults so that you are hosting safe and secure meetings for your students. Hope that helps. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Again, my email address is sgraysgray@wqsb.qc.ca.